So this is the last of the first series of movies on charts, and it's about formatting the charts. We're going to begin by reiterating that the chart is a collection of objects, and because of that, there's a number of different ways to select those objects when you're formatting them. We'll take a quick look at the formatting presets on the Format tab in the Chart Tools Contextual tab group. And finally, we're going to take sort of a high-level look at all the formatting options we have when it comes to formatting the chart objects. So formatting charts, I've got what is arguably a really ugly chart sitting at the bottom of this worksheet, but it's supposed to serve a purpose, and hopefully it will do that. If you're going to format the chart objects, it's important to understand that they actually are chart objects. I can select, for instance, the chart title and grab it carefully and move it to another location. I can delete it by pressing the delete key. I'm going to Control Z to bring it back. So each one of these objects, and I'm going to move it back to the center, on the chart make up the chart, and they are separately formattable. So the next question becomes, well, how do I select the chart object other than doing what I just did, and that is to directly click on it? There are several ways to select the chart objects. In the last movie, we saw on the Layout tab that there's a current selection command group that you also see on the Format tab. That offers not only a way to select the chart object that you want to format, but there are two other commands, the first one being Format Selection, and when you left-click that, you'll get a dialog box that has on it all the formatting choices and options that you have for, in this case, the chart title. I'm going to close that dialog box for now. The other command button, Reset to Match Style, resets the colors of the chart to the theme that may have been selected for this workbook. Themes were covered in another movie. So currently I have the chart title selected, but I can select any other object that makes up the chart with this drop-down in the current selection group. I can select, for instance, the plot area or the legend or any other component of the chart. I get that same drop-down list when I right-click on the chart and right-click on any chart object, and in the mini toolbar, there it is. So I can right-click any chart object and get this list, and then from this list select any other chart object. And the chart objects, in case you're not sure what they are, I'm going to left-click off of that. When you hover over the chart, you'll get a chart tip. That's the chart area. That's the chart title. That, of course, is the legend. That's a data table, and so on. And if you decide that you don't want those chart tips to show up, you know the components of the chart well enough, you can turn them off by going to the Advanced Option Settings, Alt-F-T, going to Advanced, scrolling down a bit. You can deselect Show Chart Element Names on Hover, and also deselect Show Data Point Values on Hover. I'm going to leave those alone and cancel out of that. So ultimately what we want to do is format the chart object. Selecting the chart object is the first thing that you want to do. And of course we just saw in the current selection group that we could select the chart object and then launch the formatting dialog boxes by left-clicking Format Selection. Well, we can sort of shortcut that process by just double-clicking one of the chart objects. In this case it's the chart area, and I get the array of formatting choices on the Format Chart Area dialog box. I'm going to close that. If I were to select instead the chart title, I get the formatting options for the chart title. In fact, I don't even really have to close that dialog box. I can just double click on another component of the chart. That's the Format Plot Area. Double click again. That's the Format Axis Title, and so on. So I'm going to close that down. In addition to being able to access the Format dialog box, there are also a number of other options that you have when you right-click a chart object and get the shortcut menu. We, of course, get the mini toolbar that allows for a lot of text formatting. By the way, the font format that's selected for the chart area will be the same font that's used in every other object in the chart, if it involves text, of course. And there are certain choices that show up in the shortcut menu all the time, regardless of what chart object you select. And it is almost the case that you can exclusively work on the chart itself and access all the other chart options, like changing the chart type. And there's our template we created from a prior movie. I'm going to close that. The options change on the shortcut menu, but we always have at our fingertips the ability to change the chart type or change the data that's used in the chart. And you can also use the arrow keys to select objects on the chart. But before I do that, I'm going to go to the Format tab so that we can see in the current selection group which object we have selected. Right now it's the chart area. When I left arrow, it's now the data table. Left arrow again, it's the salesman series. Left arrow again, the trend line, and so on. And once I select the object that I want to format on the chart, I can press Control 1 and pull up the formatting dialog box that's associated with that object. So there's many ways to get to the formatting dialog box that's associated with the chart objects. Probably the quickest way to do it is to double-click the chart element. So I'm going to escape out of that and go back to the Format tab. The Format tab is made up of presets. We have shape styles that includes some fill options where we can add a picture, a gradient fill, a texture. We can control the outline. We've got word art styles. We've got the arrange group, and we can manually resize the chart. All of this functionality was covered in prior movies because this functionality is associated with shapes, word art, smart art, and for the arrange groups, those options apply to all the objects that you could have in your worksheet, pictures, etc., charts. So since those things were covered in other movies, we're not going to go into detail with them here. Just understand that they are formatting presets that you can apply to your objects, in this case the chart objects, or you can get some granular control over the formatting of these chart objects by accessing the format dialog boxes that we've been pulling up thus far in this movie. So I've got a schedule showing 14 different chart objects, which is all the potential chart objects that you could have in your chart. In row 5 and in column A, I've got a list of the different formatting options that we have that apply to those objects. I've also conditionally formatted these cells so that when we have some given formatting options selected, the object for which those selection choices apply are called out with some special formatting. So when I use the spin button and go down through these choices, you can see what's happening. All the line styles have to do with the chart objects that are highlighted or called out in row 5. There's some options for the series that are specific to the series. There's some options like shadow that apply to every single chart object, as well as glow and soft edge. And then continuing down, there's some formatting options that apply just to the chart area, like the size, the properties, which is the chart name, and the alternative text, which is the chart name for people that have disabilities that may want to access your spreadsheet. So going back up, left-clicking to start the list at the top, row 6 has some specific formatting options that are applicable for the given chart object, like legend options. If I double-click the legend, the first choice that I have as far as formatting are legend options. These options are either exactly the same or similar to the options that you have when you're adding, in this case, a legend to your chart in the first place from the Layout tab. They're positioning options. Data label, double-clicking that, are also similar to what you find on the Layout tab. Just left-clicking one more time, the data table. These are options that you actually don't have on the Layout tab, but they do give you some more granular control over the display of the data table. So in row 6, there are specific formatting options that are applicable for given chart objects. As I go down, there's marker options that have to do with just the series. And using the drop-down to select one of the series, Salesman, and then left-clicking marker options, have a number of different choices when it comes to displaying the marker options. So without going into infinite detail about all these different options, because that would take hours, and nobody would want to watch a movie that's that detailed. What I'm trying to do is sort of provide a high-level view of all the formatting options that we have for these chart objects. And some of them make sense as to what you would be able to format, like the number options. They're associated with the horizontal and vertical axis. And of course, you may not have numbers on your horizontal axis. In that case, you wouldn't be able to format using the number formatting. I'm going to move down one more row. The fill options, and in the case of series, it's called marker fill, but it's the same thing, are the same options that you have when you're selecting or choosing a fill color for a cell or a range of cells, or any other object. You can have a solid fill and determine the level of transparency. You can apply a gradient fill and select a couple of different colors, the orientation, direction of the gradient, change the brightness, the transparency. You can add a picture or use a textured fill, a pattern fill, and all of these fill options are going to be similar regardless of which object that you're applying these fill formatting options to, including, as I said, an individual cell. So closing this and continuing down the list, we've got border color and border style, which applies to areas and not lines or grid lines or trend lines, error bars or series. But there are line color and line styles that do apply to those chart objects. And going down past those individual choices that we have for the series, the next two options apply to every single chart object. You can create a shadow, and I'm going to double click the chart area, where first you have a selection of presets that you can choose from. I'm going to left click that one. And having selected that, I can change the color, and I have a lot of other things I can change about it too, the transparency, size, and etc., blur, angle, and distance. The next formatting option also applies to every single chart object, and that's the glow and soft edges. It probably doesn't make sense to do a shadow and a glow, but again, you have a choice of presets, change the color, you've got some other fine-tuning you can do. I'm going to close this and move down one more row where we have a lot of 3D formatting options that apply to most of the chart objects. Curiously, it doesn't apply to the legend. And arrowing down one more time, we've got some alignment options, and as I said earlier, we have some formatting that's applicable to the chart area, or really to the chart itself. The size, the properties, which is the name of the chart, and the alternative text. So that's formatting the chart. When we're formatting a chart, which is made up of a bunch of objects, we first need to select that chart object and then launch the format dialog box associated with that chart object. Probably the easiest way to do that, as we found, is to double-click that chart object. Alternatively, we can use the formatting presets that are on the Format tab, or we can get some granular control over the display of these chart objects by using the vast number of formatting options that we have for each one of these chart objects in the Format dialog box associated with that object.